Before we get into today's episode, let me greet you all as I always do with peace. Let me say assalamu alaikum to my brothers and sisters in Islam. Black power to the Panthers, both new and true. Shalom to the original Jews. Hotep to the Kemites, and God bless all the Christians listening. And finally, Hamjamboni, Karibu, and welcome. Jina langu ni Asad Malik, Nina Furaha Kukutana na Wewe, and that is of course Kiswahili, the language of the Black conscious community. I am Asad Malik, host of this podcast, co-founder of United Black America, and I sit on the board of the Pan-African Alliance. I always start my podcasts and my events and anything that I do when there's a community gathering off with that greeting to remind you all that we don't have to be uniformed in our belief. We don't have to be uniformed in our background, and we don't have to be uniformed in our opinion to be unified in our intentions, and those intentions must always be liberation and salvation across the Pan-African diaspora. So this is actually episode 2 of the Keys to Black Consciousness podcast. And the whole purpose of this podcast is to help you elevate your vibrations, right? I've decided that there's more than enough negative energy online. There's more than enough negative energy, more than enough negative vibrations floating around in our community across the African diaspora. And I don't need to add to that energy. So you're not going to hear gossip. You're not going to hear anything that's going to lower your vibrations, or read anything that's going to lower your vibrations on this platform. Of course, you need to be aware of threats and dangers that are out there, but we're not going to harp on divisions. And let me give you a great example of that. As of the recording of this podcast, there is a debate going on around the ADOS movement, right? The movement that essentially we support. We do support reparations. But what I'm noticing, and this is something that's been going on for a long time, and this goes all the way back to El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, peace be upon him. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and play a clip from El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, peace be upon him, just to refresh your memory.
You have to read the history of slavery to understand this. There were two kinds of Negroes. There was that old house Negro and the field Negro. And the house Negro always looked out for his master. When the field Negroes got too much out of line, he held them back in check. He put them back on the plantation. The house Negro could afford to do that because he lived better than the field Negro. He ate better, he dressed better, and he lived in a better house. He lived right up next to his master in the attic or the basement. He ate the same food his master ate and wore his same clothes. And he could talk just like his master. Good diction. And he loved his master more than his master loved himself. That's why he didn't want his master hurt. If the master got sick, he'd say, "What's the matter, boss? We sick?" He was as sick as the master. When the master's house caught a fire, he'd try and put the fire out. He didn't want his master's house burned. He never wanted his master's property threatened. And he was more defensive of it than the master was. That was the house Negro. But then you had some field Negroes who lived in huts, had nothing to lose. They wore the worst kind of clothes. They ate the worst food. And they caught hell. They felt the sting of the lash. They hated their master. Oh, yes, they did. If the master got sick, they prayed that the master died. If the master's house caught a fire, they prayed for a strong wind to come along. This was the difference between the two. And today you still have house Negroes and field Negroes.
So early on in this movement, we see this division between the house Negro and the field Negro. We see this division between members of the conscious community and the rest of the diaspora. And when it comes to things like ADOS, I'm noticing that that's only aggravating the rift between us, right? Let me go a little bit deeper. When you're scrolling through your Twitter timeline or Facebook, when you're on social media, you might see some people say that we, as the enlightened ones, not to be confused with the Illuminati, we in the conscious community should completely separate, completely ignore, completely shut out, not deal with other Negroes who may not believe the way that we do. Have you seen that? Sometimes these brothers and sisters who think they are more revolutionary than others, who identify more with the movement, will call those that don't adhere to their beliefs coons. And then on the other side, you'll see people use terms like Hotep niggas and Ashy Ankh Negroes, right? This is only aggravating the divisions between us. We're not advocates of shutting out black folks who may not think the way that you do. And we're absolutely not advocates of shutting out black folks who may not have progressed to your level of so-called enlightenment, which, if we really look at it, it's indicative of a lack of enlightenment, right? Because if your community, if this black and conscious community is really what it says it is, then we should be the teachers and the enlighteners of the rest of the world. We shouldn't be aggravating these divisions between us, divisions which I hypothesize are instigated by agents, right? And before I get too far off into a tangent, let me just clarify what I mean by agents. There are groups of people out there who are not interested in seeing any group come together because it threatens their lower vibrations, right? And so what they'll do is they'll look at the nature of the group that they want to attack. And if you want more contemporary examples, let's look at what happened with the 2016 election here in the United States of America. It is alleged that Russians wanted a particular candidate to win. And in order to make that happen, they set up a number of fake Facebook and Twitter and other social media profiles. And these profiles would aggravate the rift in the Democratic Party, right? So everyone who supported Hillary, they wanted to create all these sideways movements that made you not want to go and vote at all. For instance, one of the Russian accounts that they created was a movement that tried to persuade black folks not to vote. Because, of course, if we didn't vote and black folks by and large weren't going to vote for Trump, then that would lead to less turnout for Hillary Clinton. Right. And in some ways it worked. You know, those accounts were out there saying, you know, we shouldn't even vote. We shouldn't participate in this system. And by the way, we've always been advocates of participating in the political process of any system that you were a part of. So when I see those messages, you know, I either ignore them, I block them, or I go to war with them. Now, you're not supposed to feed the trolls. That's an age-old internet rule. But it's important for those watching the conversation to understand that we're not condoning this kind of behavior. So all this aggravating separations between different Pan-African philosophies, different philosophies in black consciousness, is counterproductive. It's lowering our vibration. It's aiding to division, and that's something that we can no longer tolerate. So once again, on this platform and on our website at thepanafricanalliance.com, you're not going to see any gossip, any news, or anything that's going to lower your vibrations. We're going to make you aware of the dangers that are out there. We're going to use historical context to make sure that we're not repeating the same mistakes that we repeated in the past, but everything else is going to be vibration enhancing. So before I continue on this tangent, which could be a podcast on its own, and in fact it will be later on, so make sure you're subscribing, let me break down our format. If you're familiar with what we used to do with United Black America Radio, it's just about the same. We're going to do reader listener emails. Now, before you skip over the reader listener emails, I always add my perspective. I try and drop some jewels. You're going to hear examples that you might have lived with or identify with through these reader listener emails. So you're going to get something out of these. And it's always a good way for me to shout out those brothers and sisters who support us, who are members, who are reaching out, looking for answers. And it's a way for me to not just answer them, but answer questions that you might have for yourself. All right. Occasionally we get into what we call the Do the Knowledge segment. And this is where I break down the lessons behind news, what we call our recommended scrolls. If you go to panafricanalliance.com, click in the menu, you'll see books. Those are our recommended scrolls. These are books that all of you should be reading to enhance your consciousness. Then we get into a short media break. This is where I introduce you to black conscious artists, poets, spoken word musicians. Sometimes it's just like media clips, anything that I can throw at you to enhance your vibration, make your day a little bit better, and break up the acoustic monotony that my voice can sometimes carry. I'm just playing. You know you love listening to me. And then we get into our main topic and our interview. So for this episode, we're rolling out the red, black, and green carpet for two queens that I'm very impressed with. This is the team behind blackzen.co. You're going to be hearing from them after the media break. So that's the format. Let's go ahead and get into a couple of reader listener emails. First one comes from a queen named Tiffany, and she writes, Assad, thanks for reaching out to me. I grew up in the Baptist and Pentecostal church and got saved at age 13. Starting off in the church has definitely built a good foundation for me. However, as I am now 37 years old, my spirit thirsts for true knowledge about my true original roots and heritage. Last month, I felt in my spirit that it is time to renounce Christianity and religion as a whole and stop believing in Jesus Christ. My spirit has been leading me to learn the real truth about how religion and my former belief in Jesus has been created for me to be ignorant about my true identity. Break. Some of y'all can probably relate to this. A lot of you all come into this community out of Christianity, and that's not surprising at all. She continues. My understanding is that Jesus is only a made-up entity, and I truly desire to learn who my true original gods and ancestors were. So my journey is to get more in touch with my true heritage and learn the different spiritual traditions within my culture. I also desire to learn more about the subconscious power that was used by my heritage that has now been wiped out from the subconscious mind in order to get set free. Again, thank you, Tiffany, for reaching out. For those of you all listening, you could probably relate to her story if you came up out of Christianity. Here's what I have to say about that. First of all, I think she's making the right move because Christianity as it exists currently is not compatible with African spirituality. Now hear me out, because I know a lot of you all are in the church, and if you really are honest with yourself, you're in church because of the inspiration that you get. You're in church because of the energy that you get. You're in church because you're surrounded by your friends and family and people that you've known for a long time. You're not necessarily in church for the spiritual development, right? Yeah, you'll get a few passages and maybe you'll find a minister who can deliver a sermon that'll make the top of your head tingle. But when you really think about your spiritual evolution, at its core, you're going to start asking questions that might lead you away from Christianity. I understand that's scary because it's like leaving your community. And it's also scary because your blood remembers how your ancestors were lynched for not adapting to Christianity. Or not adopting Christianity is what I wanted to really say. But here's what's going to make that journey a little less frightening for you. You've got to learn about African spirituality. You got to learn the different spiritual systems out there. So if I came to you in kindergarten and I asked you if you wanted to be a phlebotomist, and maybe it's something that's interesting to you, maybe you'd be good at it, but you ask, what is that? Well, you need to learn first. When you get into middle school, high school, or primary, when you're matriculating through your education system, through the education system, you learn about all these different careers. You know, you have career days and people come in, they talk about their careers, and maybe there's one that speaks to you. And you're not really sure why it speaks to you, but you know, that's what I want to be. For instance, when I was in middle school, you know, I didn't know the difference between any of the careers out there. I didn't know any of the differences between branches of the military, anything like that. How could you at that age, right? I mean, you know what you see on TV, you know what maybe your parents were, and maybe you say, well, that's what I want to be too. But I remember that a Marine came in, and this Marine possessed the kind of bearing, the kind of confidence, the kind of quiet strength and professionalism that I wanted to embody. That spoke to me and my personality type, and that's ultimately why I became a Marine. But had I not been exposed to that energy, I would have never even known about that career path or considered that career path until perhaps it was too late for me, right? Because there is a cutoff time when it comes to the military. And so what I'm saying is, once you've decided to explore beyond the realms of Christianity or Islam, which is rare because typically the penalty for exploring outside of Islam is death, but once you've decided to explore outside of your spiritual system, then you've got to embark on a process of exposing yourself to as many forms of African spirituality as you can. What do I mean when I use the phrase African spirituality, and what do we as a community, the Black conscious community, mean when we use the phrase African spirituality? We're talking about any spiritual practice that is developed by the African diaspora for the African diaspora, right? Here's why that's important. And again, here's why I said that Christianity as it exists is incompatible with African spirituality. Different cultures have different characteristics that they value, and that forms the nature of their civilization. America is a violent culture, and if you don't believe that, look at the fruits that we've produced. Mass shootings, a bloated so-called criminal justice system, a system of mass incarceration. Same can be said of places like Nigeria. If you feed video games that are filled with violence into a culture, music filled with violence into a culture, artificial foods, an environment that targets them. If you allow antagonism between different groups to fester, then it is but natural that you will produce a violent culture. So we can't be surprised when Nipsey Hussle is murdered. And I'm not getting into conspiracy theories. We're going to say that for the member-only live stream, right? And by the way, if you'd like to become a member, we'd love to have you. PanAfricanAlliance.com/VIP. But of course, when you have a violent culture, there will be casualties, right? So I say all that to say different cultures have different characteristics that they value, and that forms the nature of their civilization. So when it comes to Western culture, we've talked about this before. There are 5 values that have led to the establishment of Western civilization. And those values are individualism, conflict and control, ownership, manipulation, and consumerism. These are Western values, as opposed to what we call indigenous values. Indigenous values are values like collectivism, cooperation, common heritage, natural law, and contribution. We wrote an article on this, and I'm going to include links in the notes that are beneath this podcast or above this podcast or in the show notes section or in the description in somewhere. You'll be able to find it on the page that you're listening to this podcast on, right? But these values bleed over into every part of a culture, including religion. And so when the West comes in contact with a religion, a spiritual system like Christianity, then they start to superimpose their values on that religion. Let me give you an example. For those of you all who are Christians coming up out of Christianity, or you're familiar with Christianity, Genesis 1:26 reads, "Then God said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." Right? Now let's contrast that with Chief Seattle from the Suquamish tribe. Here's what Chief Seattle said. "We know that the white man doesn't understand our ways. One portion of the land is the same to him as the next, for he is a stranger who comes in the night and takes from the land whatever he needs. The earth is not his brother but his enemy, and when he has conquered it, he moves on. He leaves his father's grave behind, and he does not care. He kidnaps the earth from his children, and he doesn't care. His father's grave and his children's birthright are all forgotten. He treats his mother, the earth, and his brother, the sky, as things to be bought, plundered, sold like sheep or bright beads. His appetite will devour the earth and leave behind only a desert." See, that's the difference that one's values makes when it comes to one's spirituality. Christianity and the ownership and control and individualism superimposed on it by Western civilizations, Western cultures, gives man ownership and domination over all creation, whereas indigenous spiritual systems more appropriately put man in his place as an interconnected steward of all creation, a part of all creation, a member of, not the owner of, creation. Do you see the difference there? And so that's why we're careful to differentiate African spirituality from other spiritual systems, because we've got to think about the culture that is superimposed on different spiritual systems. Now, if we strip all of that away, we get back to the origins, which is why so many spiritual systems seem to be so similar, right? Because at their core, they're all the same. At the core, they all share universal truths. But it's because these cultures have superimposed so much BS over them that they become obscure, that they become so differentiated across all these different cultures. So going back to my earlier assertion, once you start stepping out of Christianity, it's important for you to learn about and expose yourself to as many forms of African spirituality as you possibly can. We wrote a whole list on more than 140 different books that you can explore that cover everything from Yoruba religions and Obeah to Kemetic science, and we even get into some offshoots of Western religions like Moorish science, the philosophies of the Hebrew Israelites, the Nation of Gods and Earths, or who are also called the Five Percenters. Of course, you all know that's an offshoot of the Nation of Islam, and of course the Nation of Islam is an offshoot of Islam. See, when it comes to Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, these are what we call Abrahamic religions. And by and large, they're Western religions. Yeah, it's true. We can get into that conversation later on, but again, I'm going to save that for the members and we'll do a live stream together. So take some time, explore different forms of African spirituality, do some reading, do your research, consult with babalawos and priests and priestesses until you find a system that truly speaks to you. And once you find that system, then practice it with the knowledge that it is for you. Not everyone is going to walk your spiritual path, nor are they meant to. All of us are extraordinarily different. And it would be inappropriate and irresponsible for you to force your new beliefs on anyone else. So accept the Christian brothers and sisters who may not have progressed, who may not be ready to step outside of their community the way that you have. Accept them and give them the same respect and space to develop that you would like to see from them. No more instigating these divisions between the religions. We've had enough of that. In fact, I was sidebar. I was talking to a circle of brothers that I'm a part of, an accountability group that I'm a part of, and there's one particular brother who's a hardcore separatist, and another brother chimed in, if we separated today, we would do the exact same thing to one another that's been done throughout history. We would have our own version of the Crusades. We would have our own version of the Holocaust, only this time, instead of it being Nazis and Jews, it would be the Igbos versus the Yorubas, two different tribes in Nigeria. It would be the Hebrew Israelites versus the Black Christians, right? It would be all of those of us who are enlightened or who are on the path towards enlightenment or who believe in Black consciousness, and it would just be all these different philosophies battling each other. And so before we even get to that point, let's go ahead and start squashing these divisions, squashing these beefs, learning from one another, instead of playing into the hands of those groups who may not want to see better from the world around them. Okay, so that's enough of that. One more reader listener email before we get into our media break, and this is coming from a member of the family named Olusola Adenoran. And apologies if I slaughtered your name. I am working on my Yoruba. And I know this member of the family is Yoruba because he writes, I'm a Yoruba man from Nigeria, West Africa, but I must confess, after listening to your broadcasts about Orisha and Yoruba philosophy, I feel like I was lost and rediscovering myself. All the things I saw as a child growing up in Nigeria but took them for granted suddenly started to have meaning and value. My wife is Southern African. She saw me watching Santeria and she laughed at me saying, "Ain't you ashamed that a white man is teaching you your own culture?" There are very few Yoruba Orthodox traditional temples in Nigeria, but unbelievably one of the largest is actually situated in my hometown. But never once did I set foot in it because I was born and brought up a Christian. Now I feel like I'm discovering myself in the most unlikely place. Family, thank you so much for those kind words. I'm always careful to do my research, to speak in the voice of the Babalawos and the Yanifas that taught me and the other members of the community. I'm trying not to superimpose my own beliefs and prejudices on anything that I transmit to you all, so keeping the vibrations pure, and your email is confirmation that I'm doing that. You mentioned other groups trying to teach us our religion. You see, they're doing the same thing with Yoruba and other religions that they've done with Christianity, right? They will learn from us, apply it to their culture, superimpose their cultural values over our spiritual systems, and then we go back to them to consume what we gave them in the first place, only in its bastardized form. See, a major part of our effort as members of this community has to be restoring the purity of our teachings, has to be returning to the origins and rediscovering those origins, rediscovering those truths, and not just doing so, but preserving and passing them on, right? It doesn't help us at all if we have the truth and we keep it to ourselves. It doesn't help us at all if we learn all these things, if we come across all these resources and we try to hoard them or keep them to ourselves. Now, why would we keep them to ourselves? Because again, when you start putting it out there, you have other members of the Christian community, other brothers and sisters who are coming from a place of hurt and pain, and they might call you pagan worshiper. They might, clown you or whatever the case is. They might throw some white Christianity in your face. Sometimes we're afraid we might not be received as openly as we would be if we were walking the path of the many instead of the path of the few. But it's important to you, and it is important to us to constantly share the truth with our brothers and sisters. Because if we don't, who's going to win? You know who's out there tirelessly spreading lies? You know who's out there working around the clock to put this misinformation out there? Those who are unenlightened, those who don't have the best interest of themselves or their community at heart, and of course, agents. You can't just let them run out there spreading these lies, misinformation, taking this knowledge from us and then trying to repurpose it for their own gain and not say anything or do anything about it. Courage is one of the elements of the higher self that has to be cultivated in the face of the lower self and in the face of evil externally, right? And so that's something that we as a community need to work on. By the way, if you're unwilling or unable to confront that darkness when you see it, then don't call yourself enlightened. Don't call yourself divine. One of the attributes of divinity is the ability to create the environment around you. And if you're unwilling or unable to affect that environment around you, you can't call yourself divine. We're responsible for the environment that we create. We're responsible for the culture that we're a part of. We're responsible for the vibrations that are out there. And we can either contribute to those positive vibrations or we can continue to allow the negative vibrations to proliferate, right? And so don't come at me with my yacht if you want to keep it to yourself. Don't come at me with, you're a member of the enlightened Black conscious community if you fail to spread this knowledge. And I know that might be a little harsh, but trust that these words are coming from a place of love, right? I've been sitting back all these months and observing what's going on in the conscious community. And I came from that too. Look, when you first wake up, you are angry. When you first wake up, you feel some type of way against anyone who isn't Black because you realize all the damage that's been done to us, all the progress that's been lost, all the needless suffering. But I promise that you're able to transcend that over time and ascend into a place of enlightenment, a place of compassion, a place of creativity, a place of true divinity. So that's it for reader listener emails. Let's go ahead and get into this media break. And on the other side, I'm rolling out the red, black, and green carpet for the queens behind Black Zen, very appropriately for this episode since we're so deep into African spirituality and wellness. And so hope y'all enjoy this media break. I'm gonna be back on the other side. All right, peace.
There's an exercise where we could say this: rock star energy drink. Wow, I just put that in history. See how quick history come up right there. Rock star energy drink. Those who want to do the exercise, we're going to say rock star to ourselves without opening our mouths, without saying anything outside. We're going to say this to ourselves. We're going to say rock star to ourselves. Don't say it out loud at the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Now the question to ask, if you've said rock star in your mind, the question to ask is, what voice is that? What voice is that? What voice just spoke? You just said rock star without moving your mouth at all. On top of that, you on top of saying rock star, you heard yourself say rock star. How can you hear yourself say rock star and no vibration of sound has happened? See, this puts a different perspective on what sound actually is. And what memory is. Memory's not in the brain, memory's in the soul. The only thing you take with you after this life is your memories or your knowledge, your experiences. That's the only thing you take. Unless you study Egypt culture, they believe you can take all their stuff with you on the other side. Just as a side note. But if you said rock star in your mind or in your being is the true answer, is the true statement. In your being, what was that voice? What was the voice that spoke and then you heard yourself speaking? But these ears did not hear you say anything because your mouth didn't move. So the ears didn't hear it, the mouth did not move, but you spoke and you heard yourself speaking. If you close your eyes, you can see this better. If you close your eyes and put this image in another sight, if you close your eyes, you can still see this. What is the sight that can see your future? These two eyes don't see the future. These two eyes don't see the past. Yet, you can see your past and you can see your future. You can actually see your past. What is the sight that can see beyond time? Don't give it away. What is this is an ancient meditation. This is an ancient meditation that I am not the flesh. I am the energy, the consciousness, the being in the flesh. And this is proof. This is no faith. This is not religion. This is actual fact. You can speak without moving your mouth. You can hear without ears. You can see without eyes. So what happens when these eyes, this mouth, and this ear drops off into the grave? These other senses are all you're left with. Death is an illusion. Once you realize this, you live your life more courageously. Now, no one wants to die before their time, so you try to protect yourself. But know that this body is the limitation of you. It is not your zenith. It is not your ultimate. Your ultimate is that voice that just said rock star. That voice that just said rock star without nothing physical moving, that person is immortal. That person is not here with you. Let's go deeper. The body is in, what is it, 3 dimensions, right? Forward, back, right, left, up, down, and time. 4th dimension, 3 dimensions plus time. That's our physical reality. Front, back, right, left, up, down, that's 3D plus time. What happened to in and out? Look at the Easter, look at the English thought. Back, forth, right, left, up, down, no in and out. No in and out. What is in and out? Rock star. Rock star says, I exist without the body. So where is this other existence? Where is it? It's not here. It's not in 3-dimensional space where you really are. The person that said this is in a whole different dimension. Just switch a little bit. Talk to yourself more. Affirm to yourself more. Don't move none of this. No, close this down and go within and say, I am the greatest ... ever. I have all my needs coming with speed. I am a being of love and light and knowledge. No weapon formed against me shall prosper. Whatever it is, have your affirmation on your tongue. Or, sorry, in your being. This is how the gods created this whole reality. The first humans, imagine, the first humans, they came from inner space. They came out. Study the Anunnakis. They came out of inner space. Not from outer space. Inner space. Rock star. Before there was a body, there was this voice traveling in this voice's dimension. To get here to the earth, the inner voice created this outer extension of itself to be in this dimension. Once you realize that you are not just in this dimension, but you're also in another dimension, you now are free. Because whatever happens to you here in this dimension is not your only reality. See, this is how Jesus was able to get beaten and brutalized and hang on the cross. He wasn't here. He was the rock star. Inside, he went to the inner man. Do what you want with the body. I'm not here. Now, once you realize that level of consciousness, where you are officially, you identify yourself as the spirit, not the flesh. You are the inner voice, not the outer voice. Once you become the inner voice, now your outer voice has power. Now when you speak, it's not just a shell speaking. There's a being speaking through the shell. And this is where you heal all sickness in your body. This is where you command reality to work with you, and it works according to your consciousness. Why? Because it's not a shell that's speaking. There's a real being in the shell that is speaking. And when the real being speaks, all nature and the universe responds.
All right, family, welcome back. I hope you all enjoyed that media break. And our guests today have 15 years of combined meditation experience and practice. They are the founders of blackzen.co, and they've been putting in work to wake up communities of color and beyond. They've been featured in Essence Magazine, Ozzy, and Fast Company. Their work is more than about meditation, which is why I invited them on. In fact, they're dedicated to what they call wellness for the real life. So it is with great pleasure that I roll out the red, black, and green carpet for the very first interview of the Keys to Consciousness podcast for Stacy and Jasmine of blackzen.co. Queens, welcome. How y'all feeling?
Good.
Good.
Really
that intro was spot on.
Yeah, thank you.
You know how to welcome some. Let's welcome a girl.
I'm glad a blush doesn't show up on the mic. That's
bro does his research and brings you out right? As I mentioned, your site is, and your movement is so much more than meditation. Here's some of the lessons for the family listening that I learned from these two queens before I even spoke to them. I learned that real change happens once we as individuals begin to change. So it's not so much coming from the outside as it is originating from the inside. I learned that finding the compliment in every criticism is powerful. I learned that if you sit and meditate and find silence, answers will come to you. And some advice that I've started to take is every crazy idea deserves one serious conversation. I want you two to introduce yourselves and your platform to the audience.
Hey, this is Jasmine Johnson. I am the co-founder and co-host
And co-sister
of
of the Black Zen team.
Correct. We've been at it for a couple of years now, and it keeps staying interesting, and people keep saying that they want to hear more and more and more and want more content from us. So we keep putting out what we hope are really helpful, actionable items that people can take and basically make their lives better and allow us to grow, not just, first as individuals and then as a community. So
Yes, and we started this as a real touchstone to get people to even understand the concept of meditation and just how to incorporate that in a very real way.
correct.
We didn't have that when we were starting out in our meditation practice, and that's something we wanted to provide into the world to make a difference.
Yeah,
That's what we do.
that's what we do in a nutshell.
Something I'm curious about. I came up in the hood, and I came up in an environment where meditation wasn't discussed at all, let alone practiced. So how did you both get started with meditation? How did you get started in this field? Are there particular events in your life that kind of pushed you towards this field of study and practice?
Jasmine has a good story for that. I'll let you go first.
I
and
know.
I'll talk about mine.
I stumbled on it, man. I was living in New York. This is years and years ago, and I was working at a really, really difficult and challenging job. And I was so overwhelmed. And I actually came home, and my goal was to come home and sit down and pray. And when I got into my room, I was so overwhelmed that I did not have words to even put to what was happening. There was too much going on. I didn't know where to start. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to sit here for a minute. I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to try to fix something. If I can't find the words to even address what's going on, let me just sit here for a minute. And that silence was so powerful. And it absolutely, that was actually my first meditation. I didn't know it was my first meditation. She stumbled
into it. Right. She called me the next day and said, hey, I just have this experience.
Yes.
I'm like, Jasmine, that's called meditation. I've been doing that for years.
That's right. That's right.
And which was hilarious. I was like,
oh, I guess that was meditation.
Because what's funny, we were on different sides of the coast at the time. She was in New York, I was in LA, and I started meditation through yoga. Funny enough, I was just trying to lose weight, get this belly off, and very the West Side thing to do is go to yoga, But then there was always that at the end of the session, they call it shavasana, where you just sit down in silence and you just sit there. And at first, I'm like, this is silly. I used to get up before the end of the class to avoid this silence. And then you start like, why can I not sit down? Why can't I not be quiet?
Right. Why am I uncomfortable with doing nothing in this moment?
Exactly. Yeah. And so I kind of moved into it from there. And at the time, there weren't too many resources about meditation outside of Buddhist religion or any religious attachment to it. So I was just Googling. I mean, I read books. I mean, it was all an intellectual study practice. So when Jasmine called me around the same time I was learning it, I had all these articles. I think I sent you like 1,000 articles.
She did. She kind of went crazy. She went very older sister on me. And she was like, oh, well, read this, and then let's talk about this. And then
we started an impromptu book club about meditation and why it works, what it does, how does it change your brain.
Yeah.
That's how you do it.
Yeah. And I think what was interesting too is like when we were looking for resources, it was glaringly obvious that those resources didn't have people on them that looked like us.
Well, it wasn't even that. It wasn't even meditation. I found so many things on yoga and wellness. I'm like, okay, well, what about this piece? This is what's helping me.
Right.
It's because you can't sell it.
Right. You can't sell silence, right? No. It's like that's not the sexy thing to sell, but that's actually the thing that makes a difference.
Exactly.
So
and I think to speak to Stacy's experience, Stacy, you were on the West Coast, is that right?
Yeah.
And the West Coast is definitely a mecca for wellness and weirdness. I've lived in LA most of my life, and I can definitely attest to that. I was reading an article preparing for a course that we're about to do, actually, and the article reads something like this. In a 2014 study, 67% of male participants and 25% of female participants opted to give themselves unpleasant electric shocks rather than spend 15 minutes in peaceful contemplation.
Wow.
So, I believe it.
Wow.
I believe it. And it's crazy.
Isn't that crazy?
It seems crazy, but Jasmine, there's something that silence is effective. And you don't know it's effective until you try it. It's like, ooh, I don't like this.
Right.
What do you think it is about self-reflection that scares people?
Oh, that mirror.
How much time do you have?
I mean, that mirror is it's because it's so penetrating. You see every single flaw. You see every single characteristic.
That's real.
Everything that you do not like about you reflected back at you. No one's going to want that, technically. But you have to look at it to move past it. That's the problem.
But I would argue that really when you're sitting in silence and when you start to develop a meditation practice, even though those things come up, there's such a gracefulness with how you handle it. Because in the moment, like when you're looking at it or when you're noticing it about yourself, it's with such a gentleness that it's not a judgment. It's simply a noticing. Do you know what I mean? And so I think people are afraid of what the judgment is, but they don't realize that when you sit in silence, it's not a judgment.
It's an awareness.
Exactly. It simply comes up and you can do with it what you will.
And that's technically why you start a practice with awareness first, meaning you just notice things and learn to notice things without attachment or judgment, so that when those things come up in your about you that you don't necessarily like, you can approach it from that space,
right? And not with some compassion.
Yeah. So.
Well said. See, I knew I got the right pair on. The show. I think I am jumping ahead a little bit because we haven't even really talked about what meditation is, but I guess we have. In addition to awareness, and I think some parts of our community would even consider prayer a form of meditation, and indeed it is. According to YouTube, what is your definition and interpretation of meditation? If you're talking to a layman and, maybe people don't appreciate the value or they think it's pagan. I know when I started meditating, I came from a Southern Baptist tradition. And if you aren't practicing everything according to the letter of the biblical law, you were practicing paganism, right? And that's
No, I get it. Jazz and I grew up on the West Side in Pasadena. Grandmother Southern Baptist. Mom's a minister. Stepdad was a minister. Like that is the same.
We grew up in the church, so it's not.
We understand the hesitation and we understand the mindset behind why this practice feels so foreign. Completely understandable.
And what I would say is, for me, I think what helped me get into it and kind of take that stigma off of it was that I really thought of it as like, if in prayer I'm the one that's talking, I feel like in meditation I'm the one that's listening.
Yes.
Wow.
That's how we like to describe it.
Run that one more time. Run that one more time.
In prayer, we're the ones that are doing the talking, and in meditation, you're the one that's doing the listening. And so it's a conversation, and it's a back and forth conversation. And so I think sometimes people feel like, well, if I meditate, then it means that I'm not praying. And I would say, just like in a conversation, you don't talk the entire time, right? Nope. You pause and you hear something too, so that you have something to respond to. So prayer is you talking, and meditation is you listening.
Yeah. That's great, Jeff. Yeah.
That is powerful. That is powerful.
I haven't said that anywhere else before.
I think we maybe said it in passing.
Because I try to make it as simple as possible. When someone asks me what is it, I'm just like, it is just the practice of sitting in silence. Yep.
It's levels. It's definitely levels. Yeah. When I first started checking it out, I was maybe 12 years old, and the first book that I picked up was a book on Ayurvedic traditions, and it got really, really serious. I mean, if you look at some forms of Tibetan meditation, I think there are 14 levels, with the highest level contemplating a dead body, like all kinds of madness. And I was like,
I was the reader, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
Right. I was like, this is completely inaccessible. You know what I'm saying? Like, I couldn't.
Exactly. That's exactly what I thought when I read it. I'm like, this is a little far-fetched.
Which is why I think with Black Zen, our whole goal was to make meditation accessible to people that are living right now, that live busy lives, that have a lot going on, that are not reading, exactly, that don't have time to sit there and read the Bhagavad Gita and figure out like where it stems from.
Everyone should read that.
Well, it's interesting to read, right? That's for another topic, but I think there's something really valuable about taking this concept that can sometimes feel very much other and not a part of Black culture specifically, and definitely Black and Brown culture. I think it's not something that's usually talked about. And so we wanted to kind of remove the veil a little bit and demystify it and show that it is not a religion. It's not, you know what I mean? You're not signing up for a cult group. You're simply sitting down and shutting up. That's it.
Absolutely. And we found through our research that meditation is ubiquitous across civilizations. If you're talking about the Native Americans, if you're talking about obviously Eastern esoteric traditions, the problem when it comes to us and people of African descent is that a lot of our history has been cut off, and for obvious reasons, right? There's been a lot of turmoil on the continent for a very long time. But what I try to communicate to members of our community is meditation, the practice of silent contemplation, of awareness, of transcendence, of emotional alchemy. These things are found in African traditions, just like they're found in Ayurvedic traditions, just like they're found in Eastern traditions. Has your research shown you any of that?
Yeah, it's funny because I studied yoga for a little while. I studied a lot of different, even the ancient history types. You see the same things over and over again.
The themes are all there.
The themes are all the same. Yep.
Definitely.
Quiet, silent. Compassion. And then I feel like the religion takes these pieces and makes them a little more convoluted, I would argue. They add a lot of dogma and stigma around them, and they add all these unnecessary pieces that were never to be there intentionally, that don't need to be there to get the value of a practice.
True indeed, definitely. One of the other trends that I noticed, in addition to meditation and daily wellness, one of the other trends I noticed when I was listening to your podcast is fasting is often mentioned, right? How does fasting relate to what it is that you both are doing? How does fasting relate to meditation? I think, I don't know if it was episode 70, there was kind of a back and forth between which is more appropriate, meditation or fasting, which achieves what results. So do y'all want to go in on that? Like talk a little bit more about the differentiation or the similarities between fasting and meditation?
It's a harder one because if you notice in that podcast, Jazz and I went back and forth because we debate things all the time, especially when it comes to the line between fasting and meditation.
Right.
I think we can agree that both of them take away something. They require releasing of something, whether it's releasing of your thoughts in the meditation or whether it's releasing of food in fasting or specific activity in fasting. So all of it is asking you to take away something to gain more perspective on whatever it is that you're looking to get.
Right, on whatever you're trying to, because there are certain times where, I mean, perspective to gain perspective, because really meditation, you're fasting from talking. You're fasting from interacting with anybody other than just you. That is a fast in itself.
Well, it's turning off your mindset as well. It's turning off your
constant thought process and saying, I'm going to hold this for a minute because I want to see it from a different perspective. And in order to do that, I need a little bit of room.
I need to hear something else.
Right. And you have to create that room. And I think for, and everybody does it differently. For me, I create that room through my meditation practice. And sometimes there are people who, like my sister, who can create that room by fasting.
Yeah.
So it's really just how you come at it.
Because for me, fasting, it really takes out a lot of physicalness in how I operate every day. I mean, for someone who's a big eater,
right? They actually have a podcast about that. How much is enough?
You're right. You take out the energy on food, the energy to go to the grocery store, the energy to
prepare
make a meal,
think about it, and crave it.
You take away all that energy, use somewhere else. Imagine that you use for. Right. And so for me, when I fast, I do it fairly regularly. I use that time to either meditate or contemplate something else or work on something else. But it's just removing something to get space,
to use that energy in another area of your life.
Yeah.
Using the energy in another area of your life. For somebody who's like, all right, I hear y'all meditation, fasting. All right, cool. But what am I going to get out of this?
Sure. If you look at meditation, I mean, at this point, there's so much research that is like undeniable about what it does just from a physical level. So for a lot of people, it like lowers your blood pressure. It improves your mental focus. It lessens your stress and anxiety. You begin to develop empathy for people. So your relationships get deeper. They get better. And everybody over time reports feeling happier and has a higher quality of life. And I think that's something that that sometimes the research is a little fuzzy about, because obviously that's self-reported. But what I argue is that so much of life is about our perception of it. So if my perception is that I have a higher quality of life now that I have a way of dealing with emotions that come up, or not being thrown by, surprises in my life, like nothing really tosses me too much anymore, because my steady is peaceful. My steady is consistently joyful. And my steady is that I move from a place that's so grounded that nothing really shakes me. And it's not too much, and I think that's something that they talk about that in the research, but I talk about it from more of a personal point of view, where research says it does X, Y, Z, but in life, here's what that actually looks like. And we actually, it was a little thing. We have piece that together. We have on our website, it's called How Much Do You Really Know? And there's actually, we have links to all of the like scientific research that shows exactly what meditation does to you physically and mentally.
Because it really, exactly. And I think Jazz is talking about more of the day-to-day aspects and living it. I think there's actual chemical changes in your brain. There are physical and interior things happening. And that's the stuff that we articulate on the site as well. And, and that's the piece that I think, that's where all the studies, that's where they're doing the research.
Absolutely.
They want to know what exactly does it do to your brain.
Right.
So.
Absolutely. And we're going to include links to the resources that you just mentioned on the show notes page. So for those of you all listening into the future, just click through. I can attest to one big benefit that I've experienced as a result of meditation. And it has helped me understand my beliefs. And here's how.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. With the awareness that I gain, I start paying more attention to my thoughts and my feelings. And for a long time, I couldn't differentiate feelings from emotions, right? And, through a little bit of studying and listening to you and meditating and practicing and working on it, I've been able to see that, first of all, my thoughts aren't me. Right. My thoughts aren't 360 degrees of my identity. And I've mistaken that my entire life. But when I can step back and observe my thoughts, I start hearing some negative repetitions going on that
we call it the loop.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm like, where is this coming from? And so typically it's coming from real emotions that are legitimate, and emotions happen in the body, whereas feelings happen in the mind. So then I can start paying attention to how my body is reacting to certain things. And then I can get down to the real beliefs, right? So if I'm feeling groggy, if I'm feeling unmotivated, if I'm feeling aggravated, frustrated, I can get down to the bottom of my emotions, the anger, the shame sometimes, and there are other things that are going on down there. And then I can start observing the belief that fuels those emotions that lead to those feelings, that lead to those poisonous thoughts that produce negative results in my life. That's what meditation has done for me. That's been powerful.
I love that. That's powerful.
I'll tell you what it's done for me.
Yeah, that's powerful.
I feel like there's a lot of iterations of it.
There are.
For me personally, my meditation practice has created the space to let everything roll. I used to be a person just really up and down.
Everything upset her.
Everything. I only lived at 2 and 10.
Right. Her nickname was Stacy Complain Johnson, and that's real.
I feel that.
But like there was this anger. I have no idea where it came from. I mean, you can look at pictures when I was 5 years old. A scowl, like a full-on scowl on my face. There's just anger there that I don't even know how it got there, how it got put there. But it's in meditating that I'm able to actually. What's funny, I'm at the point now where I have done the deep dive and I know why I'm reacting that way. And so it's being able to recognize that and say, no, I don't want to do that right now. I don't want to. And that's the
power.
Change. That's the power. I recognize I'm being rude right now. I know why I'm being rude, and then I'm deciding, no, I'm not going to do that anymore.
Right.
So it's really having power over your feelings, over your actions. Because that's what's going to change your day-to-day life.
And then you can change your choices.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. You change your habits first, and then everything else will follow.
Absolutely. And real change happens once we as individuals begin to change. That's what this is really about. It's about gaining power over parts of ourselves that we feel powerless over. Like we're constantly reacting to these negative messages that we're being fed, misled by our thoughts, chained to our past. And meditation has given me, and I know a lot of others, the ability to transcend that. I know the word transcendence is trite now, but it truly is a transcendental experience. And
it moves you above the feelings, above the muck, above the physical nature of everything that's going on, to really see perspective on how you want to proceed in life.
Yep.
True indeed.
We in one podcast, I think we called meditation, was it your secret sidekick?
That's real. That's real though. Let's do a deep dive, because I know some members of the audience want to talk about some of the more fringe aspects of meditation, specifically chakras. So there's a lot of talk about chakra balance and associating certain chakras with, certain energy manifestations and things like that. What has your study and experience taught you about chakras, energy centers in the body, and manipulating those chakras to produce certain results? Yo, we're going to get back into it in just a second, but maybe you can relate to this, family. When I started off in the Black and Conscious community, I faced two major challenges. Challenge number one, there was a lot of information out there and I didn't necessarily know what to do with it or how to put it all together. And challenge number two, even if I knew how to put that information together, I didn't have the tools and resources to make it a part of my life. And so when I started this organization, when I started off in the Black and Conscious community, and as I evolved, I determined to make it my mission to give you both the tools and resources that you need to put all this information into action, and a simplified format for remembering all of this material, right? So what I want you to do is I want you to go to panafricanalliance.com/VIP, and I want you to become a member. There you're going to get member-only podcasts. You're going to get access to all the courses that we've done, depending on your membership level. You're going to get PDFs that simplify the entire process for you. Everything from gaining knowledge of self to starting your side hustles. On top of all of that, I'm going to connect you with other Pan-Africans, because a third aspect of being a part of this community is oftentimes you feel like you're alone. You feel like you're surrounded by people who might not necessarily be seekers, people who are pretending to know more than you, or people who have no reference point for any of the material that you come across. And so I'm going to connect you with other seekers. And so together, you, I, and the rest of this community, we're going to turn this platform into a powerful tool for accountability, shared knowledge, and building community. So go to panafricanalliance.com/VIP, choose a membership level that you can afford, and start taking advantage of our Black Business Builder tools, our member-only podcasts, our PDFs. Basically, I'm going to give you everything that you need to launch a side hustle online. And as we come across other resources, we're going to add those into the membership mix. So I want to see you over there, panafricanalliance.com/VIP. That's how you get in direct touch with me, other members of the community, and get access to all the tools that I mentioned. So let's get back into it.
So I'll give you my personal experience with it. I've been doing meditation for a while, and I have done all of it. I'm talking
right.
chakras, healing to Reiki to, everything, stones, sound baths, the whole 9 yards.
Hold on, did you say sound baths?
Yes.
Yeah. Right, this is kind of new to me. What do you mean sound? What are sound baths?
Go on that for just. You can actually find this on YouTube. But a sound bath is just, they're supposed to be tonal vibrations that you hear that are supposed to bring calm and are supposed to activate different centers of the body. Or different
centers. So we're talking like singing bowls and.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. So, and what's funny, at the end of the day, nothing is better than silence. I can say that honestly, at least for me personally, and I think everyone has their own things that work for them. But I've done all of those things, and I always come back to silence because that's what's going to really make that difference. And I think there's nothing wrong with using tools to help you find stillness faster. I think guided meditation and music, I definitely don't recommend to people sometimes because it's taking the focus off of what's supposed to be in place, which is quiet. And which is silence. So I say anything outside of, but I love the bowls too.
The bowls are fun. Well, I would say too. I think the piece that sometimes we can get tripped up on, especially if this is something that you're using to develop a meditation practice, is that it can start to feel like you're purposely trying to manipulate an experience as opposed to simply showing up and letting the silence teach you what you need to know in that moment. You know what I mean?
I think those tools become crutches after a while. That's all. Because it's I can't meditate if I don't have my crystal.
Correct. Or it's like, or I've got to have my flame in place in order to focus on something. Or I need that guided meditation because I can't find stillness in another way. And I think we try to steer away from setting ourselves up with any type of crutch, so that people understand that really you don't need special equipment to meditate. You don't need a special soundtrack. You don't need, you know what I mean? Like all you need is you, the desire, and time to find silence. That's it. That's it. That's simple.
A number of members of the community reached out to me and they wanted to use crystals and other totems, incense and things like that to amplify their energy or to amplify their focus or to amplify something that they think is present. So what you're saying is, and what I do firmly believe, and this is me, you can't amplify something that you haven't cultivated. You know what I mean? It's like I'm trying to strengthen this organism, this plant, and I'm trying to strengthen this characteristic, but I haven't cultivated it to a point where it's anything of substance, right? And so if you're trying to amplify something prematurely, you're trying to skip the growth phase that's necessary to reach real maturity in a practice.
I would absolutely agree. Yep. It's like tending to a leaf of a plant when the root's not firmly implanted. Right. Because technically, if the root is firm and has all the nutrients, the leaf will shine on its own.
Correct. It amplifies itself.
Without any outside attention to it. Yep.
Well said. Well said. So your advice to listeners is before you get into the crystals and sound baths and candles, sit, practice awareness, and cultivate that for a time.
Absolutely. Correct. Absolutely.
Correct. Sit down, shut up.
Exactly. And you know what? This is how I like to say. And I'll go even further to say that because everyone is different, during your sit, you might be led to bring on some of these other pieces.
Right.
But to do it the reverse way, to go out and then let
that come organically. Yeah. Because the beauty of each person's meditation practice is that there's no way that I'm going to know what you need in your practice. There's no way that I know how long you need to sit for or how long it's going to help. It's going to take for you to develop a deeper stillness for yourself. So,
even the basics, like what chakra is going to be important for you. Like, and we think we have ideas about what the chakras are and what pieces we want to focus on inside on the axis or whatever. But it's all about you being the focus of your practice and you tailoring your meditation practice for your benefit, because only you can do that.
Right. And only you know what you need, but you don't know that until you actually sit down long enough to understand who the you is that you're talking to.
Yeah.
Hold on. Run that back. Back.
It's sort of like, we walk around with certain perceptions of ourselves, right? Based off of our experiences, where we grew up, who's around us. And there's a picture of what we have in our minds of who we are. And I don't think it's until you actually sit down and develop a practice long enough to start to really meet who you really are, not who you portray, not who people think you are, and then you sort of act towards whatever somebody thinks you are. It's like, no, who are you right now in this moment without any other relationships or preconceived notions attached to it? And that's the person that you're trying, that's who you're connecting with. So when we have an idea like, oh, well, I think I need to work on this particular thing, it's like, that might not even be the thing you need to work on.
Yeah.
But you don't know that because you're working off of this false sense of who you are, because you haven't sat down in silence long enough to meet who you really are.
Yeah, that was me. When I first started out, I'm like, oh no, my whole heart chakra needs to explode. I am not as fast as I want to be. I need to focus on this and get that color and make sure I wear it close.
Right.
All that I was doing it the backwards way.
Correct.
Sit first. Those pieces and those chakras, all that alignment, all those things that happen that you want to happen, what we call them chakras or just balance,
energy or whatever. Yeah, it comes up organically.
Yeah, exactly. It'll balance on its own.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. In order to reinvent yourself, you have to know the self that you're starting with.
Exactly.
Oh, preach.
Exactly.
I think that's beautiful. All right, let's get a little more realistic. There are a lot of brothers and sisters who feel like they don't have the time or the energy to do this. We've talked a lot about resistance in the past. I think we all face some form of resistance. There are days when I don't feel like meditating. There are some days when my resistance wins. I typically meditate right before bed. It's kind of like that is my decompression time. And sometimes I'm just like, you know what? I'll make it up tomorrow, and then tomorrow becomes next month, and then I've broken my streak for a whole 2 or 3 months. We all understand fundamentally how important it is to meditate. We know it's a form of self-care. We know the benefits based on this conversation and what we've heard from the from the community at large. Mm-hmm. How do you deal with resistance? Very personally, how do you two deal with resistance when you do not want to hit the mat, when you do not want to fast, when you're in the middle of your fast? And Jasmine, what's your favorite food?
Veggie nachos.
Veggie nachos, right? Plus, you're on the West Coast too. It's a lot of dope veggie joints out there, right?
Yes,
you're in the middle of your fast, and you're like, you know what? My body needs some food right now. That's resistance. How do you two deal with that?
I think for me, because it definitely, and part of it is being gentle with ourselves and understanding that, like, it's fine if you can't maintain this level of intense focus for months and months at a time. I think just like all things change, so does your practice.
Jasmine, he's talking about the basics.
The basics.
When you are hungry and you come off of fast and you're trying to eat right now, do you stay with your fast or do you say, bump this?
No. You know what I do?
Hold on real quick.
So you just heard a little bit of our interior conversation.
Right. Stacey, are you the big sister?
I am.
All right, go ahead.
Because Jasmine, it's so funny because you can tell which one of us went to like the meditation school and has that background, and it works well, especially when we're discussing our topics. Try to bring it relatable because she'll have the bigger head pieces. I'm like, well, I was self-taught. It's like a self-taught school, right? Yeah. So when I have a problem meditating, I do two things. One, I will either sit for half the time that I expected to. Mm-hmm. Or I will turn on Netflix, and both of those answers are okay. Because here's the thing. One thing I've learned about meditation practice is anytime you have to force something, it's not the right direction. And that's why we also talk to our listeners. Like, if meditation is not for you right now at this time, that is perfectly fine too. Everyone comes to quiet and silence in their own time. Mm-hmm. So if you can recognize the value, you can know it's important. But if you just can't get there, that's a question of motivation. Those are other things you have to look at. But meditation will find you when you're ready for it.
Well,
and you'll make time.
Yes, and I also think that sometimes if it's a really busy time and I just don't have the time to do a 20-minute sit in the morning or at night, I just try to find smaller pockets of silence throughout my day. You know what I'm saying? So it's like if I'm walking from my car to an appointment, I purposely won't check my phone. I purposely will look around. I'll purposely just notice what's going on with my breath. I'll take a few deep breaths as I'm walking somewhere. That's just so that I can start developing that practice so that I don't set myself up for feeling bad if I can't give it a full 20 minutes.
Jazz and I will differ. I would call that mindfulness and not meditation.
Oh, I'll give you that. I think you're right
about that. You can be mindful all day if you want.
I see that.
But meditation, I feel like everybody can find 2 minutes in the morning and 2 minutes at night, no matter what.
I think so too.
See, I think that in the community, meditation and mindfulness have kind of been used synonymously. Is there a more contrasting difference between the two than what we just talked about?
Yes, I think mindful is being aware of the space around you, being aware of your feelings, being aware of things. And externally, exactly. And meditation is bringing it internally and turning everything off. Turning all of those outside external things off. And both have value, but one is going to bring clarity. The one other brings attention to detail and kind of
grounds you more in what you're doing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Got it. In terms of resistance, I think both of you touched on a strategy that I use. So I trick myself. I tell myself, look, instead of me doing 30 minutes, which is what I typically do, I'm only going to do 5, right? So all you got to do, Assad, sit down for 5.
Yeah, right.
Get the timer out.
Exactly. But I'll always end up doing my 30. But I can trick myself by baiting myself with, laziness. Like, hey, you don't have to do the whole thing. All you got to do is 5. And, when the timer goes off, I have a little chime. I think to myself, that wasn't so bad. It's just 5 minutes. So we can do 5 more. We can do 15.
It's like a gym. If I go say, well, I'll probably just walk on the treadmill for 5 minutes. But then I'm like, I'm already there. Just go ahead and do the class. You're baby stepping your way into what's good for you.
Right.
There you go.
If you can just get to if you can get to the starting line, then that substantially improves your odds of getting to the finish line. I'm the same way with the gym, the same way with the things that I need to eat, the same way with eating, period. I'll go for long periods of time without eating, even though I know I shouldn't, depending on what I'm doing with myself and what kind of work I'm doing. Reading, I'll just read a paragraph. I'll trick myself into reading a paragraph and then I'll finish a chapter. So I think that might be a really good trick. Give me some more tools for battling resistance, because it is something I really struggle with.
Yeah, I think it's finding something enjoyable in the time that you're there. I think we're more apt to do things over and over again if we enjoy it. And for me, it's being able, when I sit or when I prepare myself to sit, because I feel like there's a 10-minute window, mental preparation. Shift. Let me just calm down right now. This is, so in that 10-minute prep, I'm kind of my own hype man. It's like, ooh, about to get on this man right now.
Yeah.
To make it enjoyable. Because I feel because then you're like, because it is not amping yourself up, kind of, but it's just very much getting into the headspace that this is going to be really great. And if you set it up to be really great, it'll usually be really great. And then you're more inclined to do it on a more continual basis because the experience was so fantastic.
Yeah,
definitely feeling that. Jewels dropped in this episode. I know I said I was gonna hold you all hostage for 30 minutes, and it has been 45 almost. So as we get to the end, could you talk a little bit about what your experience has been like working in the community? What kind of work you've done? You all have been featured in some big name publications. You're getting a lot of publicity, from what I could tell at least. What's your experience been like working with women and people of color?
I think the most recent, Jazz will tell you about this, when we trained
in LA.
So Los Angeles County has a fantastic program called the EMT program. It's to train inner city adult individuals or almost adult individuals to becoming paramedics. And it started out in Oakland by a fantastic person, Michael Gibson. He started this program up in Oakland, I want to say, and then they brought it down to Los Angeles and have incorporated it into LA County. And it's really getting people without underemployed.
Right.
Underemployed men and women of color, mostly men. They had a whole cohort of just men.
Yeah.
And so Jasmine was able to provide them with meditation class, a meditation session, because we feel like that's a really important piece. We do a lot of things with Black women because that's kind of like, that's what we know.
Right.
Absolutely.
You go into the community and talk to young men about this, especially with that profession. I feel like that's one profession where you have to learn calm at some point, or that stress comes with you. being a paramedic, I mean, it's trauma.
It's trauma, right? It's trauma that you're dealing with all the time, and so you have to have tools for yourself that deal with that trauma on a personal level, so that you can actually leave work at work, and that you can live a life that is full. And so, and I talked a lot about how that particular role, what it does to you physically, if you don't learn how to shut it off. So.
Physically, mentally, spiritually, it'll corrode your empathy. One of the things that I was in the military, and meditation really helped me redevelop my empathy because, military, EMT professionals, people that work in those really tough jobs, they may come across as having a really wicked sense of humor, right? And I mean wicked in a bad way, like, because they're so numb to trauma. We're so numb to seeing violence, things like that, that we can joke about it. We can eat a sandwich over a cadaver, and it won't faze us. But that takes away from your humanity to it.
But you're exactly right. You touched on another important thing that meditation does, which is build compassion and build empathy. That I feel like if everyone had that piece kind of ingrained, it would change how we reflect outward.
Right. It changes your relationships and how you relate to people, whether or not
the world.
It really would. I know. True. It sounds usually Jasmine sounds like the more hokey one of the two, but I really
that's real.
That if everyone just had a little dose of compassion and empathy, we'd go very far.
Yeah. So we build programs like that specifically for communities of color and in spaces where we feel like it's not being talked about, but it should be, where it's a huge benefit to the people who learn these tools.
Yeah. So we've been there.
Yeah, we've been there, and that was really
Green
awesome.
Tree Yoga. It's in Compton, I want to say.
Green Tree Yoga.
Yes. They have a meditation studio out there that is predominantly for people of color.
Yeah, it's community based, so it's pay what you can, and they're doing cool work.
We had a session there. So, the goal is just to really get this in the hands of as many people as possible, at least to make it accessible. We've learned that it's because we're only a few, this is a small organization, going out is not as easy as it can because we just can't be everywhere at once.
Correct.
So we tried to create tools.
We can't split ourselves apart yet.
So we created tools that people can use at home. So like not everyone can get to a yoga studio, or not everyone can get to some place that we're out and about in teaching these sessions. So
definitely
home tools, free, if needed.
There's a beginner's guide to meditation that's on our website. We also have we also created a workbook that's attached to that. So if somebody I think that's helpful in terms of creating some consistency in a practice. I think that's some of the pieces that we've heard from every session that we've done. Like we've really tried to figure out what is the barrier to really starting and developing a meditation practice. And a lot of times it's feeling like I'm not sure how to start and I'm not sure how to keep it up. And so we created tools that are on our website that are designed to do just that.
And like you were saying in your practice, Bob, it's like you want to be able to track your progress. It helps you more accountable. If you see 3 days of pages are completed, you're like, I didn't get the other day just to.
Right. When you're checking off the calendar that's in the workbook, it's like, okay, I don't want to break my streak,
Why did I not see the workbook? I'm going to include a link to the workbook and their site and all the resources that we've talked about in the show notes. I don't know why I didn't see the workbook, but I'm definitely going to take advantage of that as soon as we jump off.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I think part of it, too, you probably didn't see it on the website because it's not the first thing. It doesn't scream at you. Like nothing on our site screams, and it's really not about selling the book. It's about getting people to meditate. And for some people, it helps to have that guidebook. So we put it there because people asked for it, and they were like, you can't be here. I need somebody sitting next to me every day telling me how to do this. And so we walk them through it every day in that workbook.
True indeed. True indeed. Well, Queens, this has honestly been one of the best parts of my week. Thank you all for sharing some energy with me. But before we cut out, give the audience some last words of advice, some last calls to action. Stacey, why don't you go first?
You know what? The only call to action is to share what we're doing and what you're learning with everybody else, with all of your circle. I mean, the goal of this is just to really have everyone be changed and when you change you, like we talk about all the time, you change you change your family unit, you change your community, and you change the broader social picture of what's happening. And that will just be the goal, just share it. Yep. If we can all get on the same page of compassion, I tell you.
We'd be okay. We'd be okay. And I would say just as a final takeaway is, the whole reason why we talk about meditation all the time is that it really does change you.
It really does.
And there are no drawbacks. No. It's the one thing where there are no drawbacks. So if you are wondering whether or not now is the time to start a meditation practice, if you feel like I need to know more before I get more into this, if you go to our website, blackzen.co, there are multiple ways to engage in the conversation. And there are some people who just listen to the podcast and they want to figure out, well, I know what I'm learning on the mat, but how does that apply to real life? And there are some who are like, well, I actually just want to start a meditation practice. What does that look like? And then there are others who are like, I don't know what I want. I just want to see what y'all are talking about. All of that is on the website. Right, just nosy, and they just want to know. And we send out a weekly wellness so people can be informed of what we're talking about. So blackzen.co has every resource that we have available. And I just encourage you, if there was something in this conversation that you thought, oh, that's something interesting and I want to know more about, follow that impulse. Yep.
Stacy, Jasmine, blackzen.co. That is a wrap. That's it for today, family. I hope you all enjoyed this episode. As always, I want to invite you to take advantage of our member-only podcasts, all of our member-only PDFs. You're going to get access to all the courses that we do. You're going to get Black Business Builder tools that include web hosting, graphic design, and everything that you need to launch your side hustle online. So if you enjoyed this content, if you appreciate what we're doing and you want to connect yourself to a larger community while taking advantage of our resources, go to panafricanalliance.com/VIP and see what we have to offer you. With that being said, remember our Black Code of Conduct to do no harm to your people, help your people when they're in their time of need, and above all else, family, hold the line, hold the line, hold the line, and I'm going to see you all next time. Habibi Fahoudie.